right. Anyone wishing to make a comment on an item not on the agenda should complete a speaker card at the sign-in desk. For items on the agenda, please fill out a speaker card and you will be called upon when that item is discussed. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Thank you. And we will start off with the Executive Director's report. Georgiana.
All right. Well, welcome, members. Just a few items that I want to bring to your attention. In your attachments under Director's report, you have the public engagement report for March and April. You also have a project status and updates for projects that the TPO have been working on, and also the Central Florida MPO Alliance highlights for February. And there's also links to those presentations in the agenda package. Also, the Metropolitan Planning Organization Advisory Council met on February the 27th. And of course, that is the organization where the 27 MPOs get together to discuss policy and exchange ideas. Of course, Chair Young is the member representing the Space Coast TPO. The biggest item on the agenda was hiring of the new executive director for the MPOAC, and also approval of the Passenger Rail 2024 priority list. The staff directors did approve that list. Clearly, passenger rail is really, is very popular within the state of Florida. It is something that all the MPOs are interested in, and of course the COCO multimodal station is on that priority list. And all of the projects on that list are consistent with the state's rail plan as well. There's not dedicated funding necessarily for passenger rail, but it is certainly potentially consistent with the strategic intermodal system. So that's good news. I also wanted to mention that Mayor Blake and Stockton Witten and I attended a DC advocacy trip, and it was, we believe, very successful concerning the COCO multimodal station. And we were able to meet with the 2 U.S. senators or their staff, also Representative Herodopoulos, and also with USDOT, the Federal Railroad Administration. And so it was a very positive meeting. And so we were there to explain to them why our station is a good investment for the federal dollars. And again, I think it was very positive. And I don't know, Mayor Blake, if there's something you would like to say about that?
In lieu of the individuals that you clearly identified, we also had the opportunity to meet with Congressional member Byron Donalds.
Yes.
We had a chance to collaborate with them and voice our concerns of the importance of this beautiful station, this edifice that will be right here in beautiful Brevard County.
Very good. So, Madam Chair, that concludes my report.
All right, thank you. We'll go to the Technical and Citizens Advisory Committee. Georgiana.
In your packet, you have the draft Technical and Citizens Advisory meeting minutes for February the 10th and the attendance report to date. The TACCAC met on Monday and received all of the presentations that you will hear today. The Mobility on Demand study that was presented, there was a lot of conversation about that, a lot of interest. As well as the TPO's Vision Zero program and all the efforts that the department is doing for Target Zero. So the citizens and the technical group were very pleased and impressed with that effort. So that concludes my report.
Thank you. Sarah, we'll go to the Bicycle, Pedestrian, and Trails Advisory Committee meeting. Thank you.
Great. Good afternoon. Sarah Crom, Senior Transportation Planner. We actually have had quite a busy staff, quite a busy time with trails for staff recently, is where we had 2 public workshops that we held. The first one was on the Southern Brevard Trails Master Plan, and it was a in-person public workshop. We held it down in Grant Valcaria and had over 50 attendees come out to learn about the potential trail network that would be built in Southern Brevard, and let us know what they see and what their vision is for trails in Southern Brevard. We then, as a follow-up, held a second workshop that was a virtual lunch and learn. So if you were unable to attend an evening meeting or just was busy that night, you were able to tune in to a webinar and provide input and feedback also with a virtual map that is currently out there. We had 21 attendees for the webinar, and that was held on March 4th. We then have a second set of public meetings coming up on trails. So we have the North Merritt Island Pioneer Trail Feasibility Study. The in-person meeting will be held on March 26th at 5:30 p.m. at the Merritt Island Moose Lodge. And then the virtual lunch and learn will be held April 1st at noon. So we encourage you to get involved with both of these trail projects. And then the next BPAC meeting will be held April 28th at 5:30 at the Vieira Government Center. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, next is the Space Coast Area Transit. Terry?
Good afternoon, everyone. Terry Jordan, Space Coast Area Transit. Thank you, sir. Items of significance by Space Coast Area Transit in particular was the presentation of the Transit Development Plan that was presented to this board last meeting, to the Board of County Commissioners on the February 25th meeting. And thank you to the board members for approving and adopting the Transit Development Plan for years 2025 to 2035. Other items of significance are transit ridership continues to increase. We are at a 3.5% overall increase year to date from this time of last year. Although we saw a slight decline in ridership of about 200 passengers overall in January, it still shows a 3% increase over a year to date for the prior year. Average ridership is around 152,000 monthly riders at this point. Other items are we took recent delivery of 5 new vehicles that are going to be dedicated to our paratransit services, being 3 E450s and 2 30-foot Freightliners. In addition, we expect to have 3 Freightliners delivered within the next 2 months or so. So we'll be able to remove from service some antiquated vehicles that have been far exceeded their useful life of above 10 years in service right now. In addition, we have 2 30-foot Gilligs on order. However, that build time is about 12 months, so we don't expect to see those for another year or so from now before delivery, and those are for our fixed route services. And that is about all I have to report on for this meeting. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Terry. I'm glad to know that those vehicles are coming in. You've been waiting for a long time. So
Exactly.
glad to know
Thank
you're
you.
getting them.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next, Florida Department of Transportation, Chuck Coppernoll.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Governing Board. I'm Chuck Coppernoll with the Florida Department of Transportation, MPO Liaison for Space Coast TPO. I have just a few short announcements. First of all, the Central Florida Construction Career Days, which occurred on January 30th and 31st at the Volusia County Fairgrounds. We had more than 1,500 Central Florida high school and technical students attend, learning about the fantastic career opportunities in the transportation and construction industry. Florida Department of Transportation will also be hosting the Central Florida inaugural Transportation Industry Hiring Event that will occur on April 30th, 2025 from 3 o'clock to 7 o'clock p.m. located at the Osceola Heritage Park in Kissimmee, Florida. Zoe McNeely with Space Coast TPO sent out flyers to everybody, but if you do not have it or you can't locate it, by all means reach out to me or Zoe and we'll make sure you get a copy of that flyer. There we go. So each year the district and the metropolitan planning organizations must jointly certify the metropolitan transportation planning process as described in 23 CFR 450.336. The purpose of this process is to ensure the MPO's compliance with state and federal regulations in the planning process. The evaluation of Space Coast TPO's performance in calendar year 2024 resulted in 0 findings and a score of 100%. So they are still at a low risk. So congratulations once again. So the February construction report is in the agenda packet, and if you have any questions about a particular project or any road closures, please see me after the meeting. Thank you, Madam Chair, and that concludes my report.
All right, thank you, Mr. Coppernoll. All right, next we'll have the consent agenda. Georgiana, would you please read the consent agenda for the record?
Certainly. Consent agenda 4A are meeting minutes of February the 13th. 4B is committee appointments. 4C is the interlocal agreement for the creation of the MPO. This agreement, of course, reflects membership and roles and responsibilities of the MPO. Excuse me, this is a 5-year agreement, and it does, excuse me, require an update every 5 years. It has been reviewed by the Florida Department of Transportation and remains unchanged with 19 total members on the governing board. 4D is approval of finance and budget items. We have 3 items on the list. The first one is the Unified Planning Work Program Amendment. Basically, what we are doing is moving $1 million of the TPO's federal allocation from our reserve box into our Unified Planning Work Program. And that funding has been earmarked for audiovisual equipment, potentially, that will likely be needed for the new Transportation Management Center that Brevard County is building. Because if you remember, our conference room for the board members will be in that TMC. So that would be our new meeting location in the future. Also, furniture, there's could be moving expenses, there could be some various expenses that we're going to need. And the remainder of the money would be used for several studies that are going to be coming up concerning, for instance, the Mobility on Demand pilot project. You'll be hearing about that presentation. After this study is complete, we may want to look at a specific pilot project for that zone, for that MOD zone. The Vision Zero program, speeding and lighting study. We've applied for a grant. If we don't get the grant, potentially we could use that funding to actually do a speeding and lighting study for areas in Brevard County. So that is what the funding is really going to be earmarked for. And then number 2 is our fiscal year operating budget amendment. We are moving a balance forward of $10,000. It's just under $10,000, and we're going to be using that for our traffic count program. We take traffic counts every year, and Brevard County and a lot of municipalities use that count program, and we have almost 15 years worth of counts throughout the years that we can look at historically. And also support for our rail crossing safety grant as well. And then number 3 is fiscal year 25, just a quarterly report for your information. And then lastly, 4E on the consent agenda, it's work order 25-18K. It's the Enhancing Crossing Safety Project Grant Support. For the new members, you know, the TPO and our partners requested $4.8 million for the railroad crossing elimination funding to install safety enhancements at 7 crossings throughout Brevard County. And you do have at your place a copy of the press release because I realized that some of you were not here whenever we were deep in that process. But basically, that $4.8 million is roughly 80% of the total project costs, and the 20% match will be provided by Brevard County, the City of Melbourne, and COCO, and it's by percentage. Brevard County has 3 crossings, Melbourne has 3 crossings, and the City of COCO has 1 crossing. And so basically, this is an approval of a miscellaneous work order because as we prepare the documentation for this grant, there's other things that are needed, an environmental test analysis, work for the grant agreement support. So basically, we've got the money, we were successful, we were awarded the grant, now we've got to deliver the grant. And to do that, it's going to require a lot of coordination. Now the work really begins, and it requires coordination amongst our 3 municipalities, and there are various grant agreements that are going to have to be done. So that is the consent agenda that we are asking for approval.
Thank you, Georgiana. Motion Blake, second Katie. Thank you. That was fast. Thank you very much. All those in favor of passing the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much. All right, next item is our presentations, Mobility on Demand presentation. Kelly Farron. Good afternoon.
My name is Kelly Fearon with Kittleson, and I'm here today to present to you all the study that we've been doing in partnership with the Space Coast TPO and Space Coast Area Transit on mobility on demand. In this presentation, I'm just going to briefly walk through what exactly is mobility on demand, and then the goals and objectives specific to this study, and then take you into more details about the zone analysis that we performed, how we identified those zones, how we refined them, and then how we've prioritized them. And then finally, just talk briefly about what's next for this study. So for anyone not familiar with mobility on demand, it can look like multiple things. We're specifically focusing on microtransit. So mobility on demand is an on-demand service. So that means that you can request a ride immediately. You're not requesting a ride for tomorrow or 4 hours from now. You're requesting it to be coming to you immediately when you need it. Mobility on demand services use smaller vehicles. So instead of your typical larger bus, these can be cars, shuttles, smaller cars that are able to get into neighborhoods. Usually mobility on demand is app-based with an option for customers to call in if they choose to do so. Mobility on demand usually is within a defined zone, and if you wanted to travel outside of the zone, you would connect to a fixed route service. And typically rides are kind of shared service, so if any of you are familiar with Uber and Lyft, it'd be like grabbing a shared Uber and Lyft ride. And there are multiple vendors that are providing this service throughout the state to different transit agencies. So if you wanted to grab a ride on mobility on demand right now, what could that look like if the service was in place? Typically, you would download an app or go to the website, and then you would enter your destination. A vehicle would pick you up. There might be another person in the vehicle, and you might take an additional stop depending on where your destination and theirs is. And you would be selecting a destination that's within the defined zone for the service. If you wanted to travel outside, then you would be taken to a bus stop and you'd be able to get on the bus directly and continue on to your journey. And finally, you'd arrive. So some of the benefits of having mobility on demand is that it's cost effective. Typically, agencies have found it to be half the operational cost of traditional fixed route service. And it is very customer focused. You're getting direct service from where you want to go, and you're not waiting multiple hours for the bus to arrive. Mobility on demand also can serve paratransit users, and vehicles can incorporate that so they're able to pick paratransit users up directly. Mobility on demand broadens the reach of typical transit. It's providing that first mile, last mile service, or it's connecting you directly to the fixed route that you want to get on. And there's congestion management benefits because it's reducing single occupancy vehicle trips because it's a shared ride. Finally, mobility on demand is dynamic. It doesn't require installing bus pads or other physical infrastructure in order to use the service. You're able to use it with your cell phone. So the purpose of this study that we completed is to conduct the analysis to identify MOD zones that could benefit from this service. And we've coordinated directly with local agencies. As part of this project, we're looking to develop a pilot framework to advance MOD service. And we're going to be assisting with providing information about different service providers and diving more into what MOD could look like if it's implemented. So when we started this analysis, we defined the goals for the study and for the MOD service. And the most important is providing flexibility to efficiently serve the county and those areas of growth, providing that first mile, last mile connection to fixed route service, cost effectively increasing ridership in areas that might have low or no ridership now, and expanding service in transportation disadvantaged areas. This is a timeline of some of the steps that went into our analysis. So we conducted peer agency interviews, a literature review, a travel pattern analysis, and then a suitability analysis to first select those zones. So we'll show you the results of that shortly. And then we further refine them through those stakeholder meetings, looking at where the boundaries of potential zones could be and what could the service look like. So this was the initial suitability analysis, and we looked at 4 main variables, so population and employment density in these areas, the intersection density, transit ridership, and any service gaps, and then the population of transportation disadvantaged users. We're really trying to target where you could have that middle to lower population employment density, where fixed route service has the high density and is serving customers well. We're not looking at making changes to that. Instead, we're looking at where there are opportunities to focus on that middle to lower population employment density areas. So there were 9 total potential zones that we identified, and I'll just take you shortly through those. You can see on the slide the different sizes of the zones, and we're showing in hatched the areas where they could potentially overlap. And some of the overlap areas are to ensure that we have a transfer station or a major destination that would be able to be served by both zones. So this here is the 3 zones for Port St. John, what we're calling Cocoa, and then Vieira. This here are additional zones. We've named them based on kind of the geographic area that we're covering. So we've broken Palm Bay into Palm Bay West, Palm Bay East, and Palm Bay South. And what it would do is also overlap with the transfer center at Hammock Landing, so that's shown in the hatched. We also have a North Melbourne zone and a Melbourne and West Melbourne zone. And we refine these boundaries directly after working with our local agency partners. Finally, the last zone is the Cocoa Beach and Cape Canaveral. So this is our smallest of the zones and could potentially serve some of those cruise areas. And as we developed the zones, we looked at who could be the target riders, what could that look like based on the size and the destinations that are within them. So after identifying and refining these boundaries, we then went through a prioritization process. All of these zones could be feasible for future MOD service, but we wanted to evaluate them against each other as we defined their boundaries and made refinements. So we used the same variables that we started with in our suitability analysis to see how these zones stacked up against each other. And because we'd done the initial suitability analysis based on these variables, we saw very similar rankings in the prioritization. So Cocoa had a score of 11 out of 15, and Port St. John had a score of 9 out of 15, but the rest were in the middle with a 10 out of 15. And so, again, we went through the population density, employment density, transportation disadvantaged, and looked at what was the service to existing fixed routes. And then from that, we provided an estimated annual operating cost, which we estimated based on the potential number of vehicles per zone, so based on the size and making assumptions about the waiting time. Our next steps for this study are to continue coordinating with local agencies and to select one of these areas for a pilot. And with that, we'll be creating a pilot implementation framework. And we'll be looking for potential funding opportunities in the short term. A service like this would likely need local funding to implement, but we'll also be exploring what are available grant opportunities. And finally, we'll document all the processes and steps that we did in a final report. So thank you so much for your time, and happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Forrester? Mr. Forrester, go ahead.
Your map of zones. You've got a big hole there. Go back one more. There's a hole between Cocoa and Vieira, which happens to be where Rockledge is. I'm a little concerned. It looks like one of those could have been stretched or put in a new one, or why did you leave out Rockledge?
One of the advantages of mobility on demand is because it's not requiring a lot of infrastructure, you could change the boundaries at times, but there is kind of an ideal size you want to stay into, or you start getting very long wait times and you need a lot more vehicles to serve. So when we did the initial suitability analysis, it really was driven by those variables of employment and population density, transportation disadvantaged, and then we kind of refined those borders further. So It didn't show up as one of the highest in our initial suitability analysis.
Well, I mean, I support the concept, but I'll never support a plan that doesn't include my citizens. Can't do that. And I will fight it until we get them included. So just letting you know.
Yeah, really the intention is to start with a pilot, select one area, figure out how that works and refine as needed as opposed to, trying to roll something very, very large out and kind of have to learn through that. So understand.
Feeling left out right now.
Understand.
Mr. Capizzi, you had a question?
Yeah, actually, I got just a couple smaller questions. So this is a government-run program?
Typically, transit agencies in Florida, yes, do run this program.
So wouldn't this be considered competing against private sector, since you're doing the same exact thing as Uber and Lyft?
There are some differences. I mean, if you called in Uber, you would be the only passenger, and it would be a higher price. It would arrive directly. You wouldn't have kind of a shared ride. So the intention of the service is to kind of expand access to transit. Also, if your destination was outside of the mobility on demand, we would be transferring you to fixed route. So if you wanted to go somewhere more directly, the private might be an option that you want to consider. But this would help to kind of bridge that gap of providing service, especially for transportation disadvantage, connecting to transfer stations, existing fixed route, kind of getting people onto the system.
I like the idea of it. It's just my concern is I don't think government should compete against private sector, and I feel like this is on the cusp of that. So that's just my. But I mean, I love the idea of it, and more access for people getting around.
I
Thank you.
also have heard the same concerns. I actually had a citizen reach out to me today that was basically saying exactly what the mayor was saying. And did I miss in this that, is there anything in North Brevard?
We don't have anything in the northernmost part of Brevard that stood out in our suitability.
So like you talked about the disadvantaged, and so not to knock some of the other areas, but like Scottsmore Mims, I mean, we've got some serious transportation disadvantage. Not only do we not have a whole lot of routes that go up that way, but the socioeconomic situation that's up there, this kind of thing would be really helpful to my constituents up there that can't get to a bus stop because it's 5-10 miles away, from where they may be living. And up there, they don't have sidewalks, they don't have streetlights, they don't have any of those things to keep them safe. And people, up in that area, they fly down US 1. Like, they're driving 80 miles an hour down US 1. And so if you get hit walking on the side of the road to get to the bus stop, so I would think that would be part of the equation versus someplace like Vieira that, I mean, I can't, there may be some, disadvantage, but it's,
Yeah, and part of it is trying to find that right balance of the density that exists when we defined these zones to make sure that it would be a successful service. Some of the areas along the border of the county, when we really drilled down into it, some of the destinations look like they're outside the county boundaries, so we didn't advance it in this phase of the study.
is there a way to update that, to change it? Because like Mr. Forster said, like Rockledge, that's right in the middle, and they don't have any service. And is there a way to get some input from us before you guys move forward?
Really, at this point, we are looking to identify just one pilot program. So, we understand there are needs countywide, but, the analysis looking to just identify one and kind of move that forward as a pilot, implement that, see how it's successful, and then, could look further.
Thank you. Mr. Cole?
Yes, my concern is the same as Commissioner Delaney. I noticed that it appears that Brevard County stops at Fort St. John. And, I mean, we've got 50,000 people in Titusville, and I know we have disadvantaged areas. And as Commissioner Delaney stated, Scottsmore and Mims, I just think that you guys just forget us like you always do. And I, like Mr. Forrester, I feel the same way. I can't support support a plan that doesn't support our.
Sarah, could you or Terry maybe shed a little bit more information on
Absolutely.
why this was?
So no one is necessarily being left out. What the ultimate goal was let's try and figure out which area is going to be the most successful for a pilot. We don't want to roll out a program that isn't successful and basically sour taste or create a situation where we can't expand into areas such as Rockledge or Titusville, Scottsmore, and Mems. As you can see, there was some small areas that popped up in Scottsmore and Mems, but really at the time it was not necessary. These areas were not necessarily going to create the most successful MOD program. Now, as the program continues to develop and form, absolutely, like, let's cover the entirety of the county, but let's really make sure that we're going for the MOD zone for this pilot project that is going to be the most successful and be the most applicable to serving all four of the suitability analyses. So absolutely, we always see parts of Titusville, Scottsmore, Mems, parts of Rockledge pop up when we're looking at transportation disadvantage. Scottsmore and Mems specifically really doesn't have the intersection density that really fed into it, where it's like you need intersections in order to be able to stop at corners and things like that, as well as also there was another element that I am forgetting, and I'm so sorry, Kelly, in regards to the intersection density. So it's, once again, we're not forgetting about Rockledge, we're not forgetting about North Brevard. We talked through all of them. It's just trying to narrow down to the most successful. And then absolutely, let's reevaluate after we run the pilot for a year.
I can't imagine that Viera has that many disadvantaged areas in there. I guess I really don't understand, if you're going to have a study, why wouldn't you have a complete study that would include the entire county?
We did include the entire county at the big,
I
so
just didn't see it on the map.
this was, the entirety of the county was included with these 4 suitability analyses. And so you can very clearly see where the darkest pinks are showing up. And so the initial analysis did include the entirety of the county. And that's then when we narrowed it down to the areas that were popping up as being the most prime at this time for mobility on demand. So yes, we did originally look at every single populated area within the county, within Brevard County. And then we went out and we met with the various municipalities. We met with Brevard County, we met with the city of Cocoa. We did not meet with Viera. Viera, we actually kind of just paused on because we really felt like the other ones were going to be more successful and really serve the other four suitabilities the best. And so we met with Brevard County, we met with Cocoa, we met with Melbourne, West Melbourne, and Palm Bay staff to refine and look at these and make sure that, Cocoa Beach and Cape Canaveral, and also to make sure that the municipalities were actually receptive to this. But as I said, we are not eliminating anything off the table. We're trying to find what's going to be the most successful out the door.
Golf carts in demand would be really popular.
Golf carts.
Mayor Blake, you had a comment?
I defer the floor to Councilwoman Moscoso. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Ms.
Megan.
Moscoso. Ms. Moscoso, you have a comment?
Yes, I would just echo the comments of our vice mayor too. I think the most successful, it would be more successful for helping the people that need it the most. But I do have a question. Is this only going to be for Brevard County residents?
No.
Because what's going to stop tourists from coming in and saying, well, this is a free service, I'm not going to use Lyft or Uber anymore? That's what I would do.
So, I mean, that absolutely out in Cocoa Beach, Cape Canaveral, you would end up having non-residents, potentially using it.
Is this designed to be a free service?
No.
I'm not clear about that. I didn't think it was.
Or reduce? Is it
Yeah, typically transit agencies charge a few dollars compared to maybe what you would expect if you paid for a full Lyft or Uber somewhere. But yeah, there is usually a price. on the
Do
service.
you know what the price is? I'm sorry.
Some agencies charge $4, $5, but a lot of it depends on which zone it is and how big it is. How far are you going? How far are those trips? So if it's the 7 square miles, that's different than if it's the 23 square miles. So it could change a little bit, but usually it's a few dollars.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Ms. Moscoso, is that
That's
your
it, yeah.
question? All right, thank you very much. I'm sorry, let me move on here. Commissioner Feltner.
I let her go because she's a lady.
Could I just clarify something? When we talk about transportation disadvantaged, are we also talking about elderly folks who are unable to drive, or disabled veterans, or anyone with some sort of physical limitation that doesn't allow them to drive? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
And for the record, there may be many of those people in Viera, so I think they're throughout the county. I don't think that's necessarily specific to any one region.
Yeah,
So,
and
for
it's
what it's
one
worth.
of the things that we considered. It wasn't the only one. It's one of the variables that
Okay.
we looked at.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hammer.
How do you come up with the percentage of the disadvantages per district? Like, what's your formula for that?
We looked at the areas that it overlapped from the TPO's data and the federal data that was used for.
Okay, so.
If you can go back to
we-
the slide that had the
Yeah.
percentages on it?
So this is not strictly transportation disadvantage. This is those four
No, the one that had the
suitabilities.
percentages
Oh, I'm
on it.
sorry. I apologize, I misunderstood.
That one there. How do you come up
That
with
is census data that we took a couple years ago when we did our transportation resiliency master plan. We took census data for elderly, disabled, households without cars, people under the age of 18, anyone that basically could potentially not be able to drive or could be considered transportation disadvantaged. And basically, we took all of those different census datas and allocated it into one single map that showed us the densities of where there's transportation disadvantaged areas.
So how do you get 100% of the people are disadvantaged?
I'm going to refer to Kelly.
Yeah, it's the percentage of those areas that overlapped within our boundaries. So if all of that area had been designated as it based on that census data, 100% was
Okay,
within the
so-
boundary of our zone.
If someone's 100%, why wouldn't they be the highest priority?
Because we used more than just the transportation disadvantaged. It was one variable out of 5. So really what we're trying to find is an area that we do consider the transportation disadvantaged population, but also what is the density in that area? What's the existing transit service looking like? How many people are outside of a quarter mile of that transit service? So it was just one of multiple things that we looked at.
I'm still confused, but okay.
All right, thank you. Any other, Mr. Altman?
Yes, I want to make it clear, I'm not asking this question for myself, but if you are a convicted DUI, are you considered transportation disadvantaged?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't believe so.
Because you don't have a license, you can't drive, you might need to get to work.
I mean, if you're a zero-car household
Yeah.
because of that, then
If
maybe,
what?
But
She's,
if,
yeah.
if you're a zero-car household because of that, then, that's, I wouldn't call it correlation, but that could be causation for you to be a zero-car household. But we don't specifically pull in convicted DUI data into our
Yeah.
analysis.
I'm just curious, I mean, I know we don't want to discourage judges from taking license away, but it's very controversial. I've gotten a lot of calls. If this could be an option to take their license away. The other question, I do know for lack of child support, they take your driver's license away. That's been very controversial. I can't pay child support because I don't have a license because I can't get to work. Would they qualify for transportation disadvantage?
Yeah, I think again, it's just the zero-car household is a factor in that, but otherwise it's not specific data we're pulling in additionally.
That's not one of the census. That's not one of the census data sets that we're pulling in.
So I'm going to follow up with a third question then. If zero-car household is the criteria, if you're handicapped and can't drive, but you live with your parents and they have a car, maybe 2, maybe 3, you have a sibling,
That's why we don't exclusively rely on one census data. That's why we don't exclusively rely on one census data set. So it's like that person would be picked up by pulling in the census data on disabled individuals. Or, you know,
But that wouldn't be a zero-car household
but that's.
if you're looking at
yeah.
the household.
So imagine, and it's way more complicated than this, is we basically add up, like, I believe it's 7 to 9 different census sets. And so, yeah, you're not getting marked on zero-car household, but you're still being identified through a different census data.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So
think about, like, basically taking all the data and correlating it into one data set.
so the individuals that are living and don't have a license, they're not including DUIs or like a child support as a part of that data subset.
We don't use driver's license data.
You don't use it at all?
Yeah. At this time, I mean, it's always something we can reevaluate.
Ms. Hanley? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Altman, were you finished?
Are you done?
Yeah, I'm just still confused.
Okay,
Well,
when
I
do you
did
plan
call on
on
him and he
start
deferred.
doing the pilot program?
So really the next steps will be to meet back with local agency partners. We don't have a set date for when the pilot would begin at this
Within
time.
a year, within a year, or, you know,
I think funding is kind of the biggest
Good luck
question,
on
so
that one,
depending on,
okay.
yeah, the funding source would really dictate that.
does where else in the state do they do this right now?
Volusia County does, Sarasota County does, some of the areas in, some of the cities in southern Florida do. So Sarasota County actually has gone to explicitly using just mobility on demand instead of fixed route. So they have been doing it for, I think, at least 2+ years.
In Volusia, do they do it in just certain areas, or do they do?
Yeah, they have 2 zones. One is pretty large and covers a pretty wide area of the county. So they're within their first year of this program.
Can you send it to, we get where there are areas that they do it in? Can we see something like that? Can we have it sent to us so we have an idea what areas are because Volusia County has a rural area. We have the Daytona area right near the speedways type of things and the schools. And then if you go west of it, it's very, agricultural. So I'm just curious what zones they would have it in.
Yeah, their VoRide service, they have maps on their website, but we can definitely provide you.
Right on their.
Yeah, if you just look for VoRide, they have 2 maps that show you the exact zones and locations. So it's an existing service they've been running.
All right, thank you. Mayor Blake, did you really want to have a comment?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, we were at an FRA conference at Tampa earlier this year, where they had a similar situation there. They gave out little matchbox cars. Councilwoman Cost was able to get a question in, and she got it right, so she received, and they were talking about the various transportations and the guidelines. Now, my question I'm asking about the city, for COCO, this is both unincorporated and incorporated, so I'm getting a combination of both?
Correct, yes.
Yes.
Yes, is that a safe assessment?
Yes.
Then my next question, then, because I know like Port St. John has a COCO address, so I'm just trying to make sure we get this point of clarification. And then, even though my sister city to the south of me, I understand their feelings. I'm just looking at population-wise and density, Merritt Island. You know, I was just thinking maybe if they were included in this formula. That's East COCO, since we got a Palm Bay East, a Palm Bay South, et cetera, et cetera.
Merritt Island was not discussed because, as you can see from the suitability map, it really didn't hit on all 4 of those areas. But once again, this isn't the end all.
No. Hey, I'm in support of this because I know you're going to have to tweak it. You know why? Because the atmosphere in this room, you're going to have to make adjustments to it. You're going to amend this.
There's
Metro Sweet Georgia Brown. We're going to amend this.
Also, and as far as people implementing MOD, there are multiple cities in Orange and Seminole and Osceola that are implementing within their city boundaries, like such as Altamont and some of the other smaller municipalities over there. So this is becoming more commonplace.
Yes, I just want to let the record reflect, I'm strongly endorsing this. I like the concept. We will make adjustments to cater to, everyone's needs and concerns because there's power in numbers, and I know as we get our numbers increased, it gives us additional room to even expand it. So kudos to you all. I like it.
Thank
Got
you,
my
Ms.
vote of confidence.
Thank you,
And his
Mr.
city
Blake.
came
Mr.
up number 1 on the list.
Mr. Wills. Don Wills,
I know
please.
one is a lonely number.
Mr. Wills. Willis.
Yes, I understand this is first mile, last mile. Now, in Cape Canaveral, we have a lot of workers who are coming in from other places in the county. Cocoa, for instance. I mean, they're hotel workers, port workers that aren't going to be able to get right to their employment on a fixed route. So I can see how advantageous this would be in communities that have tourism, have workers coming in from elsewhere, because there's not many hotel workers in Cape Canaveral that live in Cape Canaveral. So that would be a great benefit for the beaches. And I know Mayor Capizzi was talking about services that are already there, but those are primarily, or at least in Cape Canaveral, are primarily for the hotels and their guests and tourists, not workers. So I could see that first mile, last mile working very well in Cape Canaveral with getting to the port, getting to the new aquarium, getting to Cocoa Beach and Ron John, whatever.
And
So
I'm really glad you brought up the word first mile, last mile, or the phrase, because, when we're talking about disabled veterans, like Feltner and Hammer brought up, is they can't necessarily get from inside of their neighborhood out to the fixed route service. And so this provides the opportunity for you to actually have some type of transit within your neighborhood. So you're able to, get into mobility on demand, take that to a bus stop, and then travel anywhere in the county.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, yes, Ms. Kate,
So-
Ms. Delaney.
I see this map here, and you said that, like, the north end doesn't have high suitability, but the map, I mean, the whole thing is pink.
You're looking at, well, the whole county is pink.
Right, the whole county is pink, but, I represent D1, so I was wondering about, like, what,
Does this not have a laser?
What's the green is?
Okay, there we go. So you have these really, it's not working. There's just very, very small little pockets up within this Mim Scottsmore.
right.
And so that's definitely being identified on the map. But as I said, we're trying to find what is going to be the most successful as the pilot.
Right.
So it's
No,
not,
I understand
no
that,
one's
but I was just wondering about, like, when we go past the pilot, I just want to make sure that we're clear about the entire county getting taken care of with all these needs versus, and not stopping at Port St. John, not leaving out Rockledge, not leaving out Merritt Island, all these different places.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yes.
All right, yes, Mr. Hammer.
I'm sorry, I'm still trying to understand it. So when you say the $4 to $5, is that going to be enough to fund the whole program? Like, is what you're charging going to be able to fund the whole program? Because from what I'm kind of hearing, all the funding from this comes from our fuel tax, correct?
Terry, how much do fares actually fund for transit?
Because how I'm reading it is everybody that's paying into the taxes is giving a service to people that aren't paying into the taxes. If that makes sense.
Less cars, road, less congestion.
Well, I mean, they don't have cars anyways.
I'll actually respond to that question this way. It's not, the fare doesn't pay for the service. What typically happens is, whether it be the transit agency, the municipality, the local government, whoever goes after the funding, typically state or federal funding, in this case, state funding, they pay 50%. The local municipality then comes in and pays 50%. That's typically how it operates. the fares then offset the local funding portion. So if you're having a customer that's paying, let's say, $5 for the fare, of course, it's not going to be the $200,000 that it takes to operate the service annually. And that's just a round number. That's not the specifics number. So the fare doesn't come close to funding the service itself.
Yeah.
Just like it doesn't come close to funding service for public transit that we operate today.
But the other funding comes from what we all pay in tax on our gas when we buy gas for our own vehicles, correct?
I won't say specifically from gas taxes. If let's just say the city of Palm Bay determines they're going to go after this pilot project to operate service in the various regions of Palm Bay, the city then determines what they're going to use as their source of local funding. It doesn't have to be gas tax. It doesn't have to be CBDG. You would determine what funding source you're going to use locally.
So each municipality can choose differently?
However you're going to fund it, is that your question?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, by all means.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you. All right, anything else for Kelly before we move? Yes, sir, Mayor?
Real quick. Okay, so you're saying basically taxpayers are subsidizing this. I thought it was, so everybody can use it? This isn't just for the vehicular challenged?
Yeah, anyone can use it. It's
Okay.
really to supplement existing transit. So it's either helping you travel within that defined zone or transferring to fixed route to get out of that. So it's,
Okay.
That first mile, last mile connection that might not exist now.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anything else for Kelly before we move on to Space Coast TPO Vision Zero in action?
Yes, sir.
Travis Hills.
Great job, Kelly. Sure. For sure, for sure.
Did you know in Florida, an average of 800 pedestrians and bicyclists are fatally injured in traffic crashes every year? What do you think is a more acceptable number?
Zero.
Acceptable? Maybe 50? Okay. This is what 50 people look like. Oh, that's my family. Friends. So now, what do you think is a more acceptable number? Zero. Definitely zero.
So, Madam Chair, that is the reason why the Space Coast TPO chose to adopt the state's goal of zero injuries, serious injuries, and fatalities on the Space Coast. So we are very much appreciative of you allowing us to do that and what we've been working on from the very beginning. And so the next two presentations are really going to be about, one, Travis is going to talk about the Space Coast TPO's Vision Zero program, because we do have a lot of new members, so you can know what we've been doing for the past several years. And then Lorene Bobo, the Safety Administrator of the Florida Department of Transportation, is going to give a great presentation on those specific countermeasures and why the department chooses some of the safety enhancements that they need to improve safety. And so, Travis, I'm going to kick it to you.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Travis Hills with Kittleson and Associates, consultant for the Space Coast TPO. I've been working with the TPO going on 14 years, so very familiar with Brevard County, love Brevard County, love doing work over here, and I've been working with the Space Coast on all of their safety-related work going on basically the last decade. So really excited to give this presentation to you all today and really kind of walk through what the Space Coast has been doing to hopefully drive down fatal and serious injury crashes within the county. So with that, the agenda for today, I'll talk a little bit about what is Vision Zero. I'll also talk through the Space Coast TPO's iterations of their Vision Zero action plan, and then discuss some success stories as well. We've gone after some grants and won some grants within the county to help move safety forward and really kind of move the needle. So before I move forward, can I get a show of hands, make sure people aren't sleeping after that pretty rowdy discussion on mobility on demand? Who has heard of Vision Zero? All right. So this should all be pretty old hat, second nature, hopefully. So Vision Zero is a strategy to eliminate all fatal and severe injury crashes within a certain area while increasing safe, healthy, and equitable mobility for all. So really the traditional approach was more of that kind of reactive approach. It was crashes happen, people die, okay, that's life. The Vision Zero approach is the more proactive approach. It's getting into the pie chart that you see on the right, the safe system approach. It's humans make mistakes, people are vulnerable. We need to build a redundant system, both from a roadway perspective, from an engineering perspective, from an enforcement perspective, to really kind of help people when they make those mistakes that they don't end up in a fatality or a serious injury. So where is the Space Coast TPO in Brevard County at in our Road Division Zero? So the 6 boxes that you see up here are kind of the general kind of roadmap, I would say. So the first step is to build Vision Zero fundamentals and the safe system approach. You're kind of using that as your baseline. You're assessing the community's traffic safety problems and what's going on within the county, engaging stakeholders and building common understanding of that vision, and then getting that leadership and sustained commitment for Vision Zero. So why I have all those kind of shaded out in blue is because we've done all those to date. And so I'll explain that in kind of the next slide. But we are at the point where we've developed 2 iterations of the Vision Zero action plan, and now we're in the implementing and monitoring stages of that plan. So really, we're in that stage. We're hoping to then continue so that we can get to 0 fatal and serious injury crashes within the county. So a little bit on the history, like I said, over the last decade plus in Brevard County with the Space Coast TPO. So starting back in 2014, 2015, this is when the Space Coast TPO implemented their Complete Streets initiative. So they set aside funding to do numerous Complete Streets projects, partnering with local municipalities to get those constructed and built. That was really the first step in the kind of Vision Zero safety approach for the county. Then Dangerous by Design came out. And so just quick show of hands, who's heard of Dangerous by Design? So a little bit less. So Dangerous by Design came out, the first iteration came out in 2016. It's a nationwide report that assessed at the time pedestrian danger index. As you see, there's a lot of municipalities, a lot of metro areas that show up on that map. In the first iteration of Dangerous by Design, Florida had 9 of the top 11 most dangerous metropolitan areas for pedestrians. So I'll let that sink in. And look at where Palm Bay, Melbourne, Titusville is, number 2. So that was kind of the kind of further impetus to keep moving forward, keep pushing safety forward in Brevard County. So in 2017, at the state level, FDOT implemented their Target Zero, or they launched their Target Zero campaign. So Lorraine will come up and speak a little bit more about that and the efforts they've been doing over the last 8+ years. And then in 2019, prior to the first action plan that was adopted, the TPO board adopted a resolution supporting Vision Zero in Brevard County. That then led to our adoption of our first action plan in 2020. And then a great milestone in 2022. So we were the first county to have every municipality adopt Vision Zero in the county, across both the state of Florida and in District 5. So really kind of great strides in collaboration to get everybody on that same page and going back to that leadership and commitment approach to Vision Zero. And then most recently, back in February of last year, we updated our Vision Zero action plan. We revised with more crash data and then updated our high injury network, which I'll talk about here in 2 slides. So going back to that adopted resolution, so like I mentioned, we adopted the resolution back in 2019. There was a refresh of that resolution in February of 2024, along with the adoption of the revised action plan. To really support the target of 0 fatalities and serious injuries. The goal year of that is 2050. So that corresponds with the current long-range transportation plan that's in development now. So really the goal is to strive to 0 fatalities and serious injury crashes by 2050 in the county. This supports continued efforts needed to implement the Vision Zero action plan, and it really supports the education and engagement of our citizens, technical staff, and you all on the board and our other elected officials to really push this forward and continue to push it forward. So a little bit staying a little bit high level and then kind of bringing it into why Brevard County, why the Space Coast. So over the 5 years of data that we analyzed, 2018 through 2022, we had nearly 3,000 people that were either fatally killed or seriously injured in vehicle crashes in the county. So just put that number in perspective, and I know cruise ships keep getting bigger and bigger, but at the time, that was about the size of an average cruise ship. So about 3,000 people died in Brevard County over those 5 years. The one thing that we want to stress over on the right-hand side is that the action plans were developed with collaboration in mind. That's really one of the key ways that we're continuing to push this forward. So as you'll see here, all of the local municipalities participated in the Vision Zero Action Plan, along with law enforcement and then private corporations, citizens. It was a very well-rounded group that got together to develop the first action plan back in the late 2010s, and then continue forward with the Vision Zero leadership team that meets quarterly throughout the county as well. So then I mentioned the high injury network. So this is where crashes are happening throughout the county. And I won't go through every single roadway, but you'll see the roadways highlighted in red, blue, yellow, and green. Those correspond to the different modes of travel that we looked at as a part of the Vision Zero Action Plan. So vehicle-related crashes, motorcycle-related crashes, bicycle, and then pedestrian as well. So moving forward with the HIN, the High Injury Network, we then narrowed our list down to what we were calling targeted safety corridors. This was a requirement by the federal government that if we wanted to go and apply for Safe Streets for All funding, that we needed to have a list of what I would call kind of capital projects. So it would be roadways that are identified for future improvements so that we can go get funding to implement safety on these roadways. So the roadways that you see here, these all tie back to that high injury network and are really synthesized based on all of the plans that the Space Coast TPO and our partner municipalities have done over the last 10 to 15 years. It includes our project priorities list, road safety audits, safe routes to school, corridor planning studies, and our bicycle and pedestrian master plan. So once we've identified those corridors, it's time to actually come up with the strategies that we're going to apply to improve safety within the county. So as you see, we have 7 objectives within the Vision Zero Action Plan, and everything is tied back to the safe system approach. So that pie chart that I showed before, it's really centered around, like I mentioned, humans make mistakes, humans are vulnerable. What are we going to do to build a redundant system so that if a crash does happen, that it does not end in a fatal or serious injury? And then very briefly, I want to end talking about a few success stories. So just from a high-level perspective, the federal government has put out a couple grants that the Space Coast TPO and its local partners have gone after over the past year plus. The first being Safe Streets and Roads for All. I mentioned that before. There's 2 different types of grants. So the first is a planning and demonstration grant. So that's basically just kind of additional safety analysis. It's maybe doing some road safety audits to go out and identify problems and potential solutions. And then there's also an implementation grant category, which is actually going out and building those improvements. And I'll talk through success stories of both of those here over the next few slides. Another program that the Space Coast TPO, Georgiana mentioned it earlier, the Railroad Crossing Elimination Grant Program. So that's a federal nationwide grant looking to improve safety at railroad grade crossings where the railroad and the roads meet. So the first success story that I want to mention is the Brevard County Supplemental Planning Grant. So like I mentioned, kind of that first category in the Safe Streets for All. They applied for and won a $320,000 grant to do additional follow-up studies on roadways that were in the Vision Zero Action Plan to go out and perform additional analysis, come up with safety solutions that can hopefully then be implemented to reduce crashes and improve safety on those roadways. And then another success story is the City of Palm Bay applying for an implementation grant and receiving $2.4 million in federal funding to go out and improve Emerson Drive. So for folks that know, this is a 2-lane road posted at 40 miles per hour through primarily a residential neighborhood in Palm Bay. 2 schools, a lot of kids that are walking and biking along this corridor. So the improvements are going to help lower the posted speed limit and really improve safety along that corridor, getting folks to slow down and make sure that we're accounting for all roadway users on that corridor. And then the last is, like I said, Georgiana mentioned it earlier, the $4.9 million, nearly $5 million award for the Railroad Crossing Elimination Grant Program. So this was a joint effort between Space Coast TPO, Brevard County, City of Cocoa, City of Melbourne, and Brightline, don't want to forget them, to enhance those 7 crossings in those different municipalities along the corridor. So I don't want to understate the importance of these wins. These are federal grants, highly, highly competitive. So to have 3 come into the county over the last year is truly a testament to that collaboration and the partnership between the Space Coast TPO, Brevard County, and all of our local municipalities. And then the last thing that I want to mention, I've talked a lot about collaboration, getting out into the community. So the Space Coast TPO partners with all their local municipalities. I'll give a lot of credit to Abby on getting out, getting the word out, about safety, about a lot of the things that the TPO is working on. And as you see, this is kind of a snapshot of the different things that the TPO does over the course of years, decades that they've been building on. So with that, I think we're gonna hold on Q&A until
Yes,
the
and we're
very
going to go to Lorene Bobo from FDOT Target Zero, right?
We're going to do there's a public comment.
All right. In between here, we're going to hear from Mr. and Mrs. Mulchandani.
Good afternoon. My name is Aparna Mulchandani, and this is my husband, Jaideep. And we traveled today from New Jersey to represent our son, Elan Mulchandani, a resident of Melbourne. Unfortunately, Elan is not here today because he was a victim of a traffic homicide in Melbourne almost exactly 3 months ago. On the morning of December 11th, 2024, our 22-year-old son, Elan, was on his usual route to work at L3 Harris, located off NASA Boulevard. His car was stopped in traffic as he waited in the right lane of I-95 to take the Ogali exit when he was rear-ended by a fast-moving tractor-trailer, resulting in a multiple-car pileup. Our sweet, gentle, dedicated, hard-working boy succumbed to his injuries at the scene of the accident next to mile marker 184 on I-95. His injuries were so severe in that fiery crash that we were not allowed to see him. Elan was cremated on December 13th, exactly 3 months ago, at Bugs Funeral Home here in Melbourne, with just us, his parents, his older brother, and his uncle by his side. Elan graduated from Purdue University in Indiana with a degree in industrial engineering in May of 2024, and moved to Melbourne to start his career at L3 Harris in June of 2024. In fact, his apartment was located across the street from the Space Coast TPO offices on Judge Fran Jameson Way in Viera. His friends and colleagues described him as hardworking, intelligent, witty, and kind, a great friend. Elan's boss at L3 Harris described him as a talented young man with great prospects. The last time we spoke to him, he was excited about his acceptance into a master's in finance degree program. Elan had such a promising future, only to be taken away in the matter of minutes due to no fault of his own. In a recent article, Melbourne Mayor Al Free is quoted saying there has been tremendous growth and various infrastructure challenges due to Melbourne-based companies such as L3 Harris hiring some of the smartest young engineers from across the country, much like our son. We have spoken to several highway patrol officers who are still investigating the crime, investigating the homicide, as well as Melbourne Police Chief Gillespie. They all mentioned how dangerous the area is with speeding and distracted drivers. When we were in Melbourne in December taking care of Elan's funeral arrangements and emptying out his apartment, we noticed a sign outside the Highway Police headquarters in Cocoa Beach that stated, 2023, 91 fatalities, 2024, 88 fatalities. I'm guessing that did not include Elan, so that would have been 89 by the end of 2024 hopefully not anymore. These numbers do not take into account the many lives affected by the 88 fatalities in 2024. Elon's death deeply affected us, his parents, and his older brother. Additionally, so many others' lives have changed forever after that day. 2 sets of grandparents, aunts, uncles, many cousins, his many friends, his boss, his colleagues, his fraternity brothers, his high school teachers, mentors, our friends, our neighbors, and countless members of the community. At Elon's Celebration of Life event, held at his high school, by the way, in his band room because he was an avid musician, more than 200 people attended and shared their shock and grief on hearing about his death. The 88 number could be easily multiplied by 1,000, and we will still miss the actual number affected by such tragedies. On behalf of the many families, on behalf of the many family, friends, and colleagues grieving for Elon, we urge you to take the necessary steps to achieve your goal of Vision Zero. We know that some of the improvements under consideration are costly and inconvenient, but they are necessary. We hope no other life is taken and no other family should go through what we are going through. Thank you for the opportunity to share our story.
Thank you very much. We are very sorry for your loss. Related to this, Lorraine Bobo from FDOT, Target Zero and Safety Countermeasures, will speak now.
Okay. I have 2 sons as well, so thank you very much for sharing Elon's story and your story with us. No family should have to go through what you're going through. Okay, I'm taking a deep breath so I don't cry. Good afternoon. My name is Lorraine Bobo, and I'm with the Florida Department of Transportation, and I'm our safety administrator here in Central Florida. We represent 9 counties. I've been with the Department of Transportation for over 25 years. I'm a civil engineer. I've worked in many departments within the Florida Department of Transportation, but I'm currently in our Office of Safety. When I was asked to lead to start the Office of Safety in 2021, I was given one task: get to zero. Unfortunately, I think I've got good job security, because we have a long way to go. Oh, sorry, apparently not talking into the microphone. But that's why I'm here today. That's why we're all here, because we want to make sure that everybody goes home every single night. So what I'd like to talk about today is just one piece of many, many things that we are doing at the department. And we're doing this together. This is not just on FDOT. This is not just on the cities. This is not just on the county. It's on every single one of us, not only in the roles that we play maybe in our jobs or elected officials, but in our personal lives as well. So today in Florida, 9 people will not go home. They woke up, they had breakfast, they will not go home to their families. That's not okay. Another 44 will be seriously injured, their lives affected forever. Both those numbers should be 0. They're preventable. We can get there. So here in District 5, we lost 635 people in 2024. So that's 635 people that did not go home, and they deserve to go home. Whether it was them that maybe made a small mistake, or were speeding, or were perfectly innocent, like Elon. They deserve to go home. 28% of those people were our most vulnerable, people walking and biking. Our biggest issues are speeding, distracted driving, and wearing a seatbelt. I don't know about you guys, I'm almost 49, and I remember my parents' the first car that I kind of remember my parents had, it didn't have seatbelts in it. But that first car that they got that had seatbelts, that car didn't move unless we had our seatbelt on. And I know my 2 boys, they'll yell for me in the back seat, "Mom, I don't have my seatbelt on yet." I'm like, "What have you been doing back there?" But they know that that seatbelt should be worn. And your chances of survival go up, I think it's 45%, just by clicking that seatbelt. So that's astonishing to me. I think 25% of our fatalities where an individual could have been wearing a seatbelt was not in 2024. That's a lot of people that could have been saved. So what's happening in Brevard County? Brevard County lost 88 people last year, people that didn't go home. 27% were our most vulnerable, people walking and biking. And that's where I talked about the unrestrained. But this is happening not just on state roads. It's happening on all of our roadways. So this is not an FDOT, goal and job. It's all of ours. So this snapshot is from the Florida Strategic Highway Safety Plan, and it just helps us make sure we're putting our financial resources, our efforts towards the worst areas. So where are crashes happening? Lane departures. Typically people that are going very, very fast, they want to pass somebody on a roadway, maybe they're distracted, maybe they're drowsy, and they leave their lane. So that could be a head-on, it could be off to the side of the road. Intersections, T-bones, people running red lights, making a left turn in front of oncoming traffic, those types of things. Work zones and then rail crossings as well are some of our worst areas. Who is this happening to? People walking and biking. That's definitely a big effort of ours. So in most crashes, a contributing factor is behavior. So we can build the safest road. But if you're on your phone, you're driving intoxicated, you're speeding, driving aggressively, most crashes, a contributing factor is behavior. So we're going to do everything that we can on our roadways to make sure that drivers, that people walking and biking are all doing what they should be doing, how they should be acting responsibly. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to put their phone down and things like that. So what I'm going to talk about today is I'm going to really focus on the speed of our roadways and speeding. Like I said before, I can talk about a lot of different things, but today I'm just going to focus on that. So I wanted to draw your attention. This is a matrix that's put out every year, and it basically helps us understand what's happening in each county and in each city. So Brevard County is grouped with our larger counties. And what you'll see, you don't want a red box. What you'll see is that Brevard County is in the top 10 of large counties in in Florida, where speeding was the cause of the crash. So before I get into that, I just wanted to say thank you. Each one of your communities has voted for a resolution and said 0 is the only acceptable number on our roadways. And what I believe you've done when you did that, when your communities did that, was you said, I care about my residents. I care about people visiting. I'm going to do everything that I have influence on to get them home. And I say it in that way because we may not have influence on everything, so let's focus what we do have influence on. Encouraging your city engineer to implement complete streets, to implement traffic calming. It could be having don't drink and drive campaigns, that type of thing, right? There's a lot of different ways that we can influence. And as Travis mentioned earlier, Brevard County was the first county in Central Florida, possibly Florida. I'm not going to say Florida because I don't know that for sure, but definitely in Central Florida, where every city, county, school board, and the TPO voted Vision Zero. And you did it years before others have. You set the model. Last year, Metro Plan Orlando achieved the same every city, every county in the MPO adopted Vision Zero. So commend yourselves for being ahead of the game. But I think as Georgiana said earlier, now's the hard part, right? Now's the hard part of making those decisions, educating ourselves on what is going to save lives and get people home. Actually, let me just go back to that slide real quick. So you might ask, what's the difference between Vision Zero and Target Zero? They're the same. They both have a goal of getting to zero. FDOT calls Target Zero. It's all of the initiatives and efforts and projects and things like that to get to zero. It's basically the same thing as Vision Zero. So focus on the zero. You saw the safe system approach. We very much believe in this in District 5. It's not just, putting the right construction project out there. It's also outreach campaigns, many, many different ways that we can have influence on getting to zero. So why does speed matter? If a vehicle is driving at 40 miles per hour and hits a pedestrian or a bicyclist, that pedestrian or bicyclist has a 10% chance of survival. 10%. That's pretty low. But if we drop to 30 miles per hour, now they have a 50% chance of survival. And if we go to 20 miles per hour, they have a 90% chance of survival. Interactions are going to happen on our roadways, but everybody should be able to walk away from them. So what are some things that we can do to lower those speeds? You may have heard of a term called target speed. That's a speed that we set on a roadway that's gonna, what speed do we want people to feel comfortable driving? I did a self-experiment about 2 years ago. I drive the speed limit. It's something I did even before in this role, but I definitely do it now because I've learned a lot more. I drove down a road, it was in Brevard County, at the speed that I was comfortable with. I didn't look at my speedometer. I wasn't looking at my dashboard that tells me what the speed limit is. I just drove what I was comfortable. And before I knew it, I was about 15 miles per hour over the speed limit. Not because I was trying to speed or I wasn't in a hurry, I was just driving what was comfortable. So what we've learned is how do we kind of affect that behavior so that people don't feel comfortable driving any faster? And we can do that in several different ways. We can do that with enclosure. If you're feeling tight, you're not gonna, if you have a wide roadway, you're just, man, I've got all the room in the world. So how do we close them in? Engagement. Are there things that are keeping that person, engaged in actually driving? How many of you have left work and then suddenly you're at home, right? You're like, I don't even know how I got here. I don't remember the last 45 minutes of my drive. How do we keep people engaged in driving? Deflection. Just little slight turns in the roadway, chicanes, a little bump in the road. Now we're affecting that slower speed. So we can do that through lane narrowing, raised crosswalks, and roundabouts. And other ways as well. I'm just focusing on these three today. So first I'll talk about lane narrowing. This is a chart out of our FDOT design manual that is giving guidance to our engineers as they're designing the roadway, that based on the type of roadway it is and the speed limit, this is the proper lane width. We are required by federal law to adopt the national standard. So this is not a Florida thing. This is a nationwide, these are the standards for lane widths. So this is 192, closer to I-95. So I just went into Google Maps to kind of show what those existing lane widths are. We've got an 11-foot on the outside and a 10-foot on the inside, and that's in both directions. And if I recall, Minton is also at, I think they're at 10 feet possibly. So this is a project that's currently under construction, so further east. And what you'll see there is we have 11-foot lanes on the outside and 10-foot lanes on the inside. So really just matching what we've already had out further west. But what that 10-foot is doing and that 11-foot's doing instead of 12-foot lanes is you're feeling, you slow down because it's a little, yes? Mm-hmm.
Everybody's holding their breath and waiting for the big accident. Because I have clients, I'm a CPA, I have clients that tow things going to construction sites. We have the lawn people. And they said one small thing, there's no traveling over, it's so tight, everybody's so tight, there's no movements, and they're waiting, we're holding our breath for that accident. I'm sorry, I really, it sounds great, nice pictures, everybody's gonna slow down. The anxiety, when I have my police officers, they have an anxiety. They're on the road 10 hours a day, and they don't even like, they said, well, you get a tractor trailer right there, and their anxiety's going up. And they go in, now what are you gonna do when you have somebody that doesn't travel that often, that's an older person, retired, and you got that tractor trailer, literally, I can reach out and touch it. And I'm having cars, I have people telling me that their cars, they're legal cars, and they said, I barely fit in that lane. I'm sorry,
Are they in the 10-foot or the 11-foot?
I don't know which lane it was. I didn't get in Pacific of that one.
Okay.
But it's not, we're holding our breath that it's so narrow that when I have clients and they find out that I'm on the TPO and they go, what can you do for this? Because when they're towing things, you've got you're gonna have boats, people boating, taking their boats down the lane. They're like going, how do I go off? Hibiscus is now, it's a little bit, I know where you're at here, but it's a little bit north of here. It is now busier than it should be. It's an auxiliary road to this. That's a problem. You're not solving the problem, you're making a problem when we do this narrowing. When you have it, when you have your bike lane, even I almost went over there the other day, that it's wide enough to have the car go through it. And I don't have a big car.
Understand.
I'm sorry, I'm just, and I've been on a bad accident. I lost my mother. I am one of those statistics up there. But this is a problem. This is a major problem in here. And I know that this is the ideology. And it's like the roundabouts. In Montana, which my brother lives in, they put in all these going into, not Billings, one of the Kalispell. They had to take them out because there were so much problems with it. And I said, what are you doing? Why are you taking out the roundabouts? He said they were more problems than they were worth. And I said, so what are you doing? He says, we're putting overpasses in. Okay. So I understand this is where everybody's going, but it's not working. If you go to the other states.
So it's not where we're going, it's actually where we've been. We've had 11-foot lanes for a long time.
Not in there, not on 192.
Well, we've got them out west.
Maybe out west, but I'm sorry, I don't think you do, because I do travel there. I know that there's people here, that the Palm Bay people that travel in that area, because if you're going to go to Disney World, you're going to go to Kissimmee, you're going down that road.
Okay, if we can hold our comments and let Ms. Bobo finish, and then we can all talk about this. I know we all want to chime in on this conversation, so we don't have that much more to go. If we could just let her finish, and then we can all talk about it, okay? Thank you, Ms. Bobo. Go ahead.
Appreciate that. raised crosswalks. So we have multiple locations around the district where we have implemented raised crosswalks. And basically, they are just a like 3 to 3.5 inch rise in the roadway with a long transition. And the goal is that we're slowing that traffic down, which is where we're going to have our most people walking and biking. It also kind of elevates the pedestrian so that they're more visible. I know in my SUV, and which is smaller than a lot of the trucks, the higher that person can be to be visible, the better. They are effective in slowing down traffic, and we've been very successful in quite a few locations across the district. So now I wanted to share about ICE. It is our intersection control evaluation. I know it's different ICE. Our name was out there a lot longer. But the point of ICE is that we don't go into an intersection with a preconceived idea of what we want to do. It goes through an evaluation process to understand what is the best intersection control for that intersection, because every intersection is slightly different. So it could be, we just need stop control, we need stop signs, we need a signal, or a roundabout might be the preferred option. So a little bit about roundabouts. And these are national statistics. This is not my feeling about roundabouts. This is based on data. So if you go from a stop control intersection to a roundabout, you will drop your fatalities and serious injuries by 82%. If you go from a signal to a roundabout, you will drop them by 78%. That's a pretty big percentage. That's a lot of lives that have been saved. It's people that are going home now to their families. But one of the things that I really like about roundabouts is the number of conflict points. So the number of opportunities that there could be an interaction. So in a stop control and a signal, there are 32 opportunities for conflict. In a roundabout, that drops down to 8. A lot less opportunity for there to be conflicts. Now, I know there's a lot of controversy about roundabouts. They don't stop crashes, but they can stop fatalities and serious injuries. Oh, it does work. It didn't work the other day, so I didn't click it. But you'll see, you can still maneuver around that roundabout. We have in the center what we call an apron. It's like a small little lip. So, you know, in our personal vehicles, we wouldn't necessarily go over it, but a semi could, fire trucks, that type of thing. We do what's called auto turn on all of our roadways to make sure that vehicles can make that maneuver. So more locally, what's happening in Central Florida? So before I showed you the national data, this is Central Florida data. We have 9 roundabouts that we have constructed in Central Florida. Several are under construction right now. In the 5 years before each of those roundabouts, we had 18 fatalities, 18 people that didn't go home. Since those roundabouts have been completed, we've had 1 fatality, and he was going 120 miles per hour. So I'm not blaming the roundabout for that one. That was purely a behavior. It was just a matter of where it was going to happen. I'll mention the Vieira roundabout. That is not an FDOT roundabout, but I did look up the crash data there. There have been 0 fatalities at that roundabout. So I've mentioned multiple different countermeasures, proven countermeasures that we can put on our roadways, and not just on state roads, but also on our local roads. This is a project in Orange County on 441 Orange Blossom Trail, just south of I-4. We did an effort, I think it was 2018, and this mile of road was our deadliest mile for people walking and biking. We were losing anywhere from 1 to 5 people a year along this corridor. So what we did is we threw We threw everything at it, in coordination with the locals. It has raised crosswalks. It has PHBs. I think we have every 600 feet there's an opportunity to cross. We put in median fencing so that people are only crossing at those crosswalks. They're not crossing where people are not expecting them to cross. And I'm happy to report that there have been 0 fatalities in this 1 mile since August of 2022. It works. People are going home to their families. What this is just showing you is that we dropped those speeds. Those speeds, people are driving the speed limit that we want them to drive now. So we want to make sure that we build the right project throughout our process, throughout scoping, throughout design, throughout construction. We work with wherever that project is, the local city, the county, neighborhoods, whatever groups are there. We want to make sure we're building the right project. But it's a compromise. We want to listen and hear what you want in your corridor. What is the feel for this corridor so that we can make sure we're implementing the right project? And I'll just say to that too, that conversation doesn't stop. We're here. If you have concerns, if you have questions, please reach out to us. We're right up here in DeLand. I know it's about an hour or so away, but we're here to talk about those things and hear those concerns. So last year in 2024, we launched the Central Florida Safety Strategic Plan. This was an idea back in 2021 when our office was created that we wanted a common kind of goal. Where are we headed? What are we going to do so that we get to 0? And we developed this plan along with our partners, the MPO TPOs, the cities, the counties, law enforcement, school boards. So those ideas and those action steps are not FDOT's action steps. They're Central Florida's action steps. We've created a steering committee, and Councilman Willis is on that. We appreciate his input and for hosting our next meeting. And that steering committee is being complemented by focus groups that are working on certain action steps that were identified in that plan. You can check it out on our website, lots of information there. And I'm inviting all of you to attend May 9th at the Daytona International Speedway. We will host our 2nd annual Central Florida Safety Summit, where we will celebrate the successes that we've had and continue to learn from each other to figure out how we can really get to 0. So I like to end on a safety second because it takes just a second to be safe. I am Irish, so I had to put the Irish safety message in. So not only please drink responsibly if you're drinking this weekend on St. Patrick's Day, but also if you do not use Do Not Disturb on your phone, it really is a great feature to keep you from picking up that phone. I've done it myself. That little ding goes off because somebody sent you a text message. I'm like, well, I'm not going to respond to it. I'm just going to look at it. Well, now I'm a distracted driver. Now I'm not paying attention to that person that had to hit their brakes or whatever it may be. So please, if you don't do that, please consider Do Not Disturb. With that, thank you very much. I appreciate your time for listening, and hopefully you've learned a few things today. Thank you.
Commissioner Delaney?
So I don't know if you've been watching these meetings or if so you know the conversation that's been happening here, and I just feel like this presentation the 3 things that this board has said is that roundabouts, lane narrowing, and raised crosswalks are things that our people are coming out in droves saying, we hate this, we don't want it in our community, and no. And so I'm a little frustrated because when I had spoken to some of the leadership in FDOT, what their response to me was when I asked about citizen input was basically they defer to the elected officials. And here we are, the elected officials, telling you we don't want it here. And we're being told, no, take it.
That's what happens.
And so where was the plan? Where are the plan for the other options? What are other things that we can do that can get us to the same result? Because there's got to be something else. And I have to, go off of what you were saying. And, a street near my neighborhood that I drive almost on a daily basis, I'm sorry, Mayor, is Clear Lake. And I know I've brought this up about 1,000 times, and I'm not going to stop bringing it up because when the Brightline station, we want it there. It's, it's going to come, I believe, and it's going to be a great thing for our community. But when it gets there, that road is going to be a disaster. And it is not safer. The sidewalks, they protrude in some areas 16 feet. And we've gone out and measured with a measuring tape. Trooper Steve was out there and had a whole thing on the news about it. Like, this is, it's
So
a whole
the bike
thing.
lane, not the sidewalk.
No, the sidewalk.
Okay.
The sidewalk, literally 16 feet. And so the other thing was the bike lane from 520 going up Clear Lake. It's the same as the road. And so, like, there is no bike lane, it is the road. And so how is that safer? I don't think that
Separating the bicyclist from the cars.
But there is no separation. The road from 520 going north on Clear Lake, the whole right lane is the bike lane and a car lane. There's no little bit on the side.
Okay. I'll have to take a look at that outside of here.
Yeah, but I'm just telling you this because, like I said, I drive it almost every day. And right now, the Brightline station isn't even there. The apartment complexes aren't even done. That area is not even close to being built out. So how do we get more input to FDOT? Because frankly, it's our money. So I don't accept the state coming down and telling the citizens what they're going to do with our money.
So what I have shared today was big picture. These are options that we have. Like I said earlier,
It's not options that we have, though. It's the reality of what we're living.
They are options, and we do want to have an open conversation with the locals. Oftentimes it's at the staff level, and then based on the project, we might come up to the elected official level to get a vote or whatever it may be. But our goal is to get all of that input and build the right project. If it is just absolutely no, we don't want it, then that's probably where we'll land. But what I'm asking you is to consider the data and the facts. Roundabouts do save lives.
Which that's totally fine. I accept your data and facts, but what I'm saying is that there has to be another option out there. Or could we do a roundabout with 1 lane versus 2 lanes and just make the circle bigger?
So those are
Or,
things that we can talk about.
You know what
Absolutely.
I mean? Like
yes.
there's got to be more communication in the design. I'm sorry? Oh. There's got to be more communication in the design because, even today, I have so many questions about the designs on some of these roads, and I figured that, that there would be some kind of information about it, and, I'm gonna send my questions and we're gonna talk about it, but there doesn't seem to be, even before I was elected, I was coming to these meetings, sitting in the audience, listening and learning, and there's no time where the design comes to this committee. We are the people who the people voted to say, be my voice, go fight for me, go speak for me. And the designs aren't even brought to us. And I have been to the FDOT public participation meetings, and we get completely disregarded as citizens. I'm telling you, I was one of those citizens. It's why I'm sitting in this seat.
I'm sorry that you feel that way, but that we absolutely take in all of those comments, positive comments, negative comments. If we don't, there's a lot of input, right? And so we don't necessarily make a decision based on one comment on a project. We take all of that
I'm telling
into.
you that I have been in rooms in these public participation meetings where the entire room is yelling, no roundabout, no
And
whatever.
we didn't build that roundabout, did we?
Well, I'm talking about
So-
North Brevard,
Okay.
but I mean, the project hasn't even been brought forward yet, so we don't know what you guys are doing.
But yes.
Thank you,
know.
thank you, Commissioner Delaney. Let's get
So-
Commissioner Altman in here.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First, I want to thank you and the staff for putting this issue on the agenda. The number one cause of accident deaths in our country, by far, are road fatalities. I mean, 20,000 people a year. Can you imagine if we were losing 20,000 people a year to plane crashes? I mean, it would shut our airports down. And I just want to thank the family for taking the time to be here and sharing that tragic loss, a young man representing the best of the best, losing him at such a young age. I've been involved in traffic safety my whole life. It's been one of my number one issues. My number one issues. Our number one killer of teenagers, our precious children. And we could sit here and talk for weeks and it wouldn't be enough. So I appreciate the time that we do need to spend on safety. I think we need to get really serious. If we're serious about zero accidents, zero deaths, which I think is where we should be, we need to talk about, really have an honest discussion of what we need to do to make that happen and to make those very difficult and tough political decisions to make that happen, or at least close as we can possibly get. One is funding. We need to put our dollars where our mouth is. We need to put serious funding dollars toward highway safety. We need more enforcement. A lot of these issues, driving distracted, drunk driving, speeding, those are enforcement issues. I can't tell you how many times I meet with the DOT and try to get them to lower a speed limit. Sometimes successful, most not, but they always say, well, that's an enforcement problem. So we need to address our partners in enforcement, and we need traffic calming. We need to do things to slow cars down. I love roundabouts. They're a lot of fun. Never knew they were so much safer, but I enjoy the one at Vieira, and I think those design changes we need to really support. Also, we need to work with auto manufacturers. Some of these safety designs, we had to fight. We fought for 10 years in the legislature to get the legislature to pass children's safety seats. Can you believe that? Mandatory seatbelt enforcement. But our automobile partners, we had to fight to require safety belts. But now with anti-collision devices, the lane correction, cruise control, it's amazing. I drive a Tesla. It's an engineering magnificent feat. And their statistics are bearing out the safest cars on the road because they help prevent distracted drivers. They help maintain cars in the lane. And I could go on and on. Rumble strips, rumble strips at our interchanges, that might have helped in that accident. So when you're coming to an interchange, I've fought for rumble strips. I haven't been successful yet because of the noise they make. I mean, they're not that noisy. We're talking about saving human lives. So I think this is good, and I think we ought to leave this meeting with the idea of coming back with a laundry list of things and action items that we can do to really make our highways safer, and to fight those efforts to oppose that. So that's my thought for the day, because it is killing more of our young people than anything we have. More than all the wars combined have died on our highways. Why aren't we doing more to stop that? And we're in a position as a TPO to really have a voice and do that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you very much. That was well said. Vice Mayor Herman Cole.
I just want to express that, I enjoyed the presentation. However, one thing I didn't see, I was in the military for 26 years. Every commander's call before a major holiday, we would have a very grotesque film showing accidents, actual accidents, to try to scare people into awareness. I saw nowhere in that presentation of any type of publicity on TV stations, any public information things on TV to make people aware of what's going on. I think that all of the traffic calming things are good, all the other things are good, but you got to increase people's awareness when they're out there. I remember, because I'm very old, years ago, after every holiday, it was published in the paper how many people died during Labor Day, during the 4th of July. I don't see those numbers anymore. The awareness has gone down. We need to increase people's awareness, and that may help. I'm not saying it's the thing that's going to cure all of our ills, but it's something that I think we need to do. Have public information announcements out there, making people aware of these statistics and the things that go on. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can I
Yes,
speak
please,
that?
Ms. Bobo. Yes,
so,
please.
I 100% agree, and
I'm
I could
glad you do.
I could have spent another hour on a lot of the outreach campaigns that we do have going on. Actually, last week we just filmed with FHP for the Move Over Law, and the goal with that particular one is that we'll go on gas pumps, it'll be on streaming services, things like that. We actually have quite a few campaigns. I think where your influence can be is having your PIO push those messages out on social media, things like that, our police departments and whatnot. But I agree, getting that information out there. The Move Over Law one is specific because that law has recently changed, and we want everybody to know that it's all vehicles now. And I'll just give a little anecdotal story. When I was 14, I was over in Ireland, and there was an ad on TV, and it was tough to watch. But this many years later, I remember every frame of that commercial. It wasn't a commercial, but that PSA. Personally, I would like to do more like that. It's just, yeah, but I agree. Thank you.
Mayor Blake, followed by Mr. Willis. You had your hand up, right? And then Mr. Hammer.
I know for a fact, I was born here, so I've seen the various modifications take place. Clear Lake used to be a drag strip from 520 heading north up until you got to the curve there on 524. Yes, the modifications to Clear Lake Road, the people did not like, because one, they were traditionally accustomed at a certain speed. So they reduced the speed. You have the positions of being able to move in and out. Yes, there's part of the sidewalk that is extended. It's a way to calm the traffic, because there are individuals that have died on Clear Lake that I'm familiar with. And the reality of it all is that we must educate the people. It's imperative that we educate the people. The citizens now do appreciate the modifications of Clear Lake. Can it be better? I'm telling you what I know because I've listened to them. You can shake your head, and that's fine. You're entitled to that, but I'm telling you what I experience. And I drive on Clear Lake daily. So I understand the importance of calming the speed, the traffic, Also making sure, because we have schools on the Clear Lake and the college campuses right there on the Clear Lake Road. So it's imperative that, yes, presence will be needed. We're going to need some more additional calming devices because of the elevator table that they're going to have at the crossings with the flashing lights, et cetera, et cetera. So we have to educate the people. And you're right, as a kid growing up, there used to be that picture with the state trooper with his hat on, telling about the number of fatalities. There were cards, they would use vehicles where individuals died from excessive speeding, and speeding itself, especially right there on Tropical Trail, North Tropical Trail, when that guy was driving over 100+ miles an hour and his vehicle wrapped around that pine tree. I recall that very vividly as a child.
No, Mayor, Madam Chair, if I may, just real
Oh,
quick.
one other thing, real quick. I would like to get the stats, please, before the modifications, post-modifications. And I know you're going to need a little time frame in there.
Will do, and we're actually going through an effort right now doing before and afters of all of our projects. So,
And that's really good because Clear Lake is a high pedestrian crash corridor. And the TPO, that was one of the corridors that we went out and did a road safety audit and made a whole host of recommendations, which is the reason why when the department came along and did this major resurfacing, this project turned into something much more for the community. Definitely may seem extreme in some cases, but it was to fix a very serious problem along that corridor. So, and the very wide sidewalk, I will say that during stakeholder meetings that the college and all the local governments were involved, Space Coast Area Transit, the recommendation, my recollection, was made that folks wouldn't necessarily use the bicycle lane. So it was more about the context of the community, that folks would rather ride on the sidewalk, and that's why it was a much wider sidewalk through that corridor. So every project is different. Okay.
Thank you.
So,
Mr. Willis, followed by Mike Hammer.
Okay, thank you. Before I was first elected, I shared Commissioner Delaney's view on FDOT. We were proposed with a roundabout in Cape Canaveral and thought it was being forced down our throat. Now, once we started the conversation with FDOT and all involved, that changed. We listened, they listened, and we don't have a roundabout. Now, we have different options now, and it's still going to take a few years before those happen, but they do listen.
How much effort was that, though? Quite a lot.
It's my experience, not your experience.
Yeah.
Okay? It took a little while, but they listened. And we had to convince the community, and the community had to convince us as elected officials. And we don't have it, but we have options. We have other options. We're realigning intersections. We're adding some different calming features in the new design, and we're going to get some crosswalks. But it took effort, and it required me to volunteer for other things and talk to more people. And it takes effort from us. So it can happen. They do listen. So that's my experience.
Thank you, Mr. Willis. Mr. Hammer, followed by Mayor Capisi.
Yeah, first off, the right thing to do is not always the most popular thing. Not everybody's going to like it, but a lot of times the safest, you have to put safety to popularity. A lot of times the safest thing to do is not always going to be the most fun. In your assessment here, there's a couple of factors that I didn't see taken into account. The first one is a lot of these people are speeding because of our roads are over capacity. Slowing them down is not going to change our capacity. These people are speeding because they're late. Traffic is the main problem. Slowing down, if the roads were empty, they're going to be going the speed limit, I promise you. Secondly, what you find out when you do things like this, yes, your numbers went down because those guys or those people found other ways to go. When you start making a road an inconvenience, they find another way to go. So when you start going through there, for instance, you put a bunch of, I'll use Emerson for example. If you put a bunch of road bumps on Emerson, they're gonna go through the neighborhoods and avoid them. That's when you're gonna have speeders in neighborhoods. So take into account where these people are gonna go when you start making a road inconvenient for them, because it will happen.
Mayor Capizzi.
I do believe you that roundabouts are, there's less fatalities. It makes sense because there's going to be a lot more, I say a lot more scratch and paint than actual. You're probably going to have more accidents but less fatalities. So I agree, and they are fun. The 10-foot lanes, honestly, I drive a 9.5-foot wide vehicle. So I've got 3 inches on each side to not hit somebody, basically. So I don't see that as being safer. Nervous driving is not safe driving, in my opinion. It looks like on most of your data, or a lot of your data, you have impaired driving and distracted or impaired or drowsy driving, which is a lot of accidents. Lane narrowing does not help with impaired driving at all. That's going to create more accidents, and also drowsy driving, more accidents. It also creates more road rage, which would be something bad. But to Thad Altman's observation, I would say the absolute #1 traffic calming device that I've ever seen is more police enforcement. Every time I've seen a police car, everybody drives the exact speed limit or just under. More so than the amount of crosswalks or speed limit signs or anything. I would love to see more funding go towards enforcement rather than experimental devices. I will say that we had a meeting earlier this week. It was a good meeting. They did listen to some of our concerns, and I appreciate you. And I know it's a hard job for you. You have to take the brunt of this, and I want to thank you for that. On that one meeting, I just want to add real quick, and I think it's coming in the email, the signs in the middle of the road too. We don't want those.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes, Ms. Delaney. Commissioner Delaney,
Thank
sorry.
you.
Followed by Commissioner Atkinson.
So I just wanted to speak about some of the things that were said. The sidewalks aren't 16 feet for long stretches. They just go like this. And so it wouldn't make sense for somebody to ride their vehicle or their bicycle on it. At one of the council members' citizen outreach events, the entire thing, if I remember correctly, was consumed by this project and the citizens' outrage towards it. All of that being said, when I was driving through Lake Mary to some of my other board responsibilities, I was driving through, I forget what road it was, but it was right through Lake Mary, and it was an FDOT road. And that road also had the lane narrowing, but it didn't quite feel so, it didn't make me feel as nervous because there wasn't the zigzag, and also the curbs were not as abrupt. And so maybe there's a middle something we can do that's more similar to like the Lake Mary road situation versus, I feel like there's two extremes, and maybe there's somewhere in the middle where we can still get a road safer, but maybe, to your point, not have people get so much anxiety when they're driving down the roads. And I was also wondering about the citizen input. Do you all measure how many citizen suggestions you implement into designs?
I guess, what do you mean? expand.
So like, at the citizen participation meetings, you guys have like a paper and we write down all of
Yeah.
our things and whatever. How many of those ideas get into the design? Do you guys measure that?
I don't have an exact number.
Right.
And it's usually a collaboration, right? It's all of these different things, and we try to land in the best project that meets all of those things. So we don't, it's not a metric that we necessarily, we implemented 10,
Yeah.
It's not something that we typically do.
Is that something that can be done? To give you guys a real look at how much citizen input is actually getting into what we see on the ground?
It's such an iterative process. I don't know that it's going to give us the data that we really need to be helpful. If I just use an example, we drive every mile of our roadways every year to understand the health of the asphalt, right? Does that roadway need to be resurfaced? This is how most of our projects come about, right? And we'll look at it, and so, this one in probably about 5 years is going to need to be resurfaced. So we take that mile, and we start looking at it and go, there's a lot of crashes happening at this intersection. There's this type of crashes happening through here. What could be causing those things? What's happening on this corridor? And so we'll start looking at, and also we're meeting with the local city or the county, wherever it is. What are you seeing? I can tell you exactly what's happening on State Road 436 in Altamont Springs, because that's where I live and I drive it every single day. I don't drive your roadways as much, right? So I want to hear who drives that, who uses that every single day to understand what's really happening, right? We can put cameras up and get near miss data, and I can look at streetlight data and all of this other stuff, but that doesn't tell me everything. So through that process, we start going, ooh, we really need to focus on this intersection, or you know what, there's bicyclists that want to use this corridor and can't get through. And so that starts getting kind of scoped out. Then when it gets to design, that's when we start coming out with like a public meeting. Hey, this is what we're looking at doing. That meeting is not intended to be, this is absolutely at the end of the day what we're going to build.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
It's to get that input and go, ugh, you don't want to do this because of this reason. Oh, we hadn't thought about that. There's a school, there's a fire station, whatever it may be. And so it develops and it morphs, right? Just today, I was a few minutes late, I was meeting with Secretary Tyler and our department heads from design and construction, because we've had some problem projects lately, I'll just say. And so we're self-reflecting. What can we do more of? So Councilman Willis talked about Cape Canaveral. I was at that meeting. That was several years ago, right? We have evolved quite a bit since then. Can we continue to evolve? Absolutely. Are we going to? Absolutely. You asked how long it's going to take for DOT to listen. We're here.
Yeah.
We're here tomorrow. We're going to continue to be here. We want to listen. Met with Mayor on Monday. We're final accepting that job in weeks. And we're still listening. We're still here. And when that project's done and something else pops up, happens, we're still here. We want to hear those things. So I guess my point is, like, I think it would be tough to say that we implemented 10 things from the public, because that project evolves until we final accept it.
Well, even if it's like a percentage, or you could say like this, these projects had, or highlight this project had this idea come from the public, or something.
We could look at stuff like that, keep that on our radar.
Yeah, because I mean, the thing that I've noticed, going to these meetings, talking to people, so on and so forth, is that people are really frustrated. I mean, all you have to do is look on wherever, and you'll get hundreds of comments of people saying, "What are they doing?"
Yeah, and we read those.
So it's, that's where the frustration is.
So just to provide my 2 cents on public input. So I've done quite a few public meetings on wide range of studies. What I found is there is a very vocal negative group of people. The people that are very supportive of a project aren't going to necessarily be as vocal, and they may not provide that input. So I just want to say there's 2 sides to every coin, and I'll have discussions with people in a room that say, this project's great, I love this project, move it forward, and then they won't leave a comment form. But then you'll get 50 comments forms from maybe the people that weren't supportive of the project. So I just want to provide, there's a little bit of balance, and I know that you probably hear a lot of the negative, but it sounds like there is a lot of the positive that's specifically for Clear Lake that's kind of coming out of that. And I've seen that reflected in the projects that I've gone and presented to the public as well.
Ms. Atkinson.
Here, I'm not sure if this is the right place for me to say this, but I wanted to say it before too many more board members leave. I actually wanted to thank everyone for supporting me in the letter that we sent from the board to Secretary Tyler, because what that did was that made it very easy for me to engage in a conversation with him, where I will tell you what he said to me was, tell me as much as you want to. So the conversation that I had with him was 25 minutes long. It was very little effort to get through to him. And it's just very simply the idea of reevaluating this particular project that's already midway through design. He was very willing to re-engage the public in that community to see, hey, is this what you guys really want? Which I very much appreciated. This happened before I was elected, but when I found out about it, people were having a real issue. And it was so easy. Now, I don't know what's going to happen, but the engagement of him and his staff for this particular relook was wonderful. And I think one of his points was what you said earlier, which is we want to put the right thing in the right place. So I'm hopeful that I know that I'm being listened to, and I'm hopeful that he's going to continue that conversation with the residents in District 3. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Atkins. Are there any other questions for Ms. Bobo and Mr. Hills before we move on to the next item? All right, thank you. Thank you, that was a very good presentation, both of you. Thank you for answering all the questions. Anything else for the good of the order? Our next meeting is here, April 10th. We have a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Mr. Blake.
Wait,